Zoom to share his message, and sorry, my good colleague and friend from Utah, Mr. Burgess Owens.
Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, after October 7th terrorist attack on our ally Israel, a wave of hate has washed across our nation. Our nation's college campuses have been the focal point of a wave of anti-Semitism that I've never thought I'd see in America. I've heard directly from Jewish students at our elite universities who have seen anti-Semitic mobs up close, darned in their terrorist scarf while shouting in support of the terrorist group Hamas. These scenes are straight out of the Jim Crow 1960 South during the days of segregation and KKK. The difference is the KKK bigots of my era hid their faces under white hoods. The pro-Hamas bigots today hide their cowardly faces behind face masks. It was my sincere hope that we would have left the past, this hate in the past, but the slow march of Marxism has spread across our campuses like a virus. It has even affected our K-12 system, where our children, as young as the second grade, are spewing anti-Semitic chants of "kill the Jews." Students and activists, teachers, and administrators are up to now have been held with zero accountability. Well, accountability is finally here. The People's House has a moral clarity to call out the anti-Semitic hate and bigotry. As a House Republican majority with committee oversight and the power of the purse, we're going to do the people's will and put an end to this Marxist indoctrinated bigotry. We're putting all options on the table as we demand our educational institutions step up, do the right things, and protect our Jewish students. I yield back.
Thank you to my colleague from Utah. Thank you for a steadfast voice in these key matters. I'm also grateful to.
And I sure hope you can speak with the governor of New York. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and to your witnesses today. My own state of Utah has a remarkable story to share with other states and, more importantly, the federal government. It can follow the same type of success that has facilitated Utah's transit ecosystem to thrive. In fact, Utah's post-pandemic lessons are a stark contrast to the doom and gloom of some of the testimony today. Utah's Transit Authority does not run a budget deficit. Ridership is up 92% in pre-pandemic levels and expected to exceed pre-pandemic levels by next year. It has not dug itself into a hole with fiscally irresponsible reduced fares. There are no National Guardsmen in Utah's transit because of safety, because safety is not an issue. Our riders are and feel very, very safe. The state legislature continues to make historic investments into transit. This year alone, putting $400 million into our front-runner double tracking effort in anticipation for the 2034 Salt Lake City Olympics. This is not by accident. The governor, the legislator, the city, and local officials work arm in arm with their Metropolitan Planning Committee, an organization, to anticipate transportation needs for the state and decades into the future. The Utah's Unified Transportation Plan, which has mapped out our transportation needs all the way out to 2050, works because everyone had a hand in it, including our rural partners. They are not left behind. I've said this from coming on to this committee, that Utah does it right. We collaborate, we're innovative, we think outside the box. We want to make sure we're keeping an environment that keeps our kids in Utah instead of exporting them. And if I can say one thing for the benefit of not only Utahns, but this country, let us be the model. We know how to collaborate, how to run a budget, and how to think outside the box and take advice from innovators. So I'm gonna make that big ask, let us be the model. Ms. Maynard, in your capacity with the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, what do your interactions with the regional metropolitan planning organizations look like, and how have you collaborated with them for the benefit of users in your transportation authority?
Thank you, Congressman. As your neighbor in the state of Nevada, you have a fabulous CEO, Jay Fox, running UTA. You do a great, we admire you from afar, I should say. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the front runner. If you could ask me that question again, my apologies.
What do your interactions with the regional metropolitan planning?
So it's interesting. We're one of the only organizations in the United States. We're also the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So literally, transit is on one floor, and you can walk down the hall, and MPO is on another floor. So the collaboration is key because we are, again, we're on the same team. We look at funding through our MPO for transit. We work collaboratively as the MPO. Of course, they're the regional planning organization for all of Southern Nevada. We are the public transit provider for all of Southern Nevada, so it works very, very well. I know that's not always the case in the United States, but I think generally speaking, the nexus there to have both the MPO and the transit system under the same roof has worked exceedingly well.
I just know we respect a mutual respect for what the state of Nevada is doing. Next one is Nevada, like Utah, has experienced rapid growth in the last 20 years, and the RTC, like UTA, is fiscally stable. What does Nevada and Utah get right that other states are missing?
You know, again, I think a lot of it has to do with the investment that the community, the elected officials, whether at the local level or the state level, want to make in that system. I think that, you know, I speak on behalf of the transit systems today, and I do think there is just some amazing transit CEOs that are doing the best that they can. I think we all take it very seriously how we spend tax dollars. We are a business. We may not generate a revenue, but we need to operate like a business. And I think when you look at it that way, again, it's looking at how you can more efficiently and effectively spend those tax dollars. And certainly understanding that we have been Utah, Arizona, Nevada, one of the fastest growing regions. It's understanding the origin and destination and where people need to be, and again, how you allocate the resources that you have.
Thank you. And I'm just, as I close out, just say, I think we all need to look at this as a business, return on investment, and best value to our customers. So thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. I think it's important to remember the historical context of how we got here and who this impacts.
Yield back, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Mr. Owens, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, I hadn't planned on going this direction, but can't help it at this point. We just had one of my colleagues talk about some of the evil that's happening at our border. There's no longer a rapid DNA test as of June of 2023 because of the Biden administration, which means we can no longer tie children coming across the border with the people bringing them across the border. There's reports of 85,000 children being lost. So far, the best you can give us is that they're not lost, it's just the people are not answering the phone. We're now hearing about children being used and reused, going back and forth to the border because of the cartel. We're talking about slavery, rape, abuse of children, stealing of children. You say that if this was your child, you'd do everything they could to stop it. What about other people's children? How can you remain part of an administration that allows this evil to happen? We talk about it, we're going to take lunch in a little bit, we move on, and nobody thinks about it other than the folks that are being impacted. These parents, that the children are being stolen, they can't just give it up the way it seems like my administration is doing. And let me just say this, because it appears that there's a big hit on private market. Let me tell you what happened to this in the private market. If a private company did the same thing, they'd be shut down after losing the first 10 kids. And then those who would be responsible for it, we'll find them in orange suits, paying a price for decades because of losing 85,000 children. So I think it's disgusting, to be honest with you. We're not in the 1800s, slave trading. We're not in the 1930s, where we're allowed the Nazis to do the same thing with the Jews. We are seeing this real time. We're sitting here talking about the lives of children, adults, and yet there seems to be no concern about resolving it. Let me do this. I need to say that I've heard your answer, so I know right now that's not on the top of your agenda. There's a plethora of rules coming through our administration, this administration. A new rule called the Non-Discrimination in Health Programs and Activities is an example of one of the rules that HHA members are now have put together. I'm curious, who on your team is responsible for putting together and deciding on these rules? Do you have a team that a group of people that do this, that say, this is what we're going to do now for this particular industry?
We have a very large team because we have a number of agencies. We have CMS, we have NIH,
Okay,
we have
but
FDA.
within those agencies, there has to be somebody. Do you have a small team? That has to be somebody making these rules.
That's correct.
All right, so who are they? Is it possible to get names of these bureaucrats that are changing literally the industries that we see across the board?
I'm not sure I understand. Congressman, that all goes through a public comment period. Everybody sees what we're doing.
Well, I'm sorry?
There's no rule that becomes final that hasn't gone through a public comment where you and everyone else
Well, you
has
go
a
through
chance
that
to take a look
process,
at it.
but there's somebody that comes up with the rules. We're talking
But
about right
before
now.
that rule becomes final, you get to see it. Everyone gets to see it.
I'm not talking about what goes through the process. Who makes up these rules? Who is it sitting at the table? Or you have physicians that are sitting at the table when it comes down to that's going to be impacting physicians?
Yes.
Okay, so this rule you have here, the non-discrimination in health program. From what I understand, by the way, physicians do have the religious liberties, right? They still have that opportunity to be able to act based on their religious conscience.
Everyone does.
Okay, so the non-discrimination in health program, would that require doctors to provide gender-affirming care regardless of their religious beliefs?
No one is forced to do anything that goes beyond their.
So even though it's a
religious beliefs.
rule, they are not forced to do this in their situation, in their industries.
The rule does not force any physician to do something that's against their religious beliefs.
Okay. Well, I was told differently, but we'll make sure we follow up on that one.
Yeah.
If in case.
Go ahead and
all right.
correct
So
them.
I guess in this case here, then the rules really are not rules. It's not just a suggestion.
No, these are rules. These
Okay.
are.
All right. So if it's a rule, are you saying then that they can decide not to just do whatever the rule might say then?
If it goes against their religious beliefs, under the law, they have protections for their religious beliefs. Therefore, they would not be forced to do something that goes against their religious beliefs.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I was told a little differently. Let's just wrap up then. I just have a few seconds. We're going to make sure I think American people hold this administration accountable for what's happening at the border. 85,000 lives, innocent children, is not acceptable in this country. No longer. And the fact that you're in a position, an administration, you should have some sway to make sure those that are part of this process are making changes. So,
Congressman, if I could just, in 5 seconds, just respond.
Yes.
If 85,000 children were lost, you, me, everyone in this room would have taken action. That number is inaccurate. That's not a statistic that's real.
So what is the real number? How many have been lost?
That's the thing. They're not lost. They're
They just
there.
not answer the phone. In other words, the sponsors not answer the phone.
Well, Congress did not give anyone in
Okay,
the
no,
federal
let me
government
just
the authority.
say this. When you leave it, you give it to a sponsor, they do not answer the phone, you don't know where those kids are, they are lost. Let's just if you don't know where they are, you don't have their address, you can't go and pick them up, you can't look, do a welfare, they are
not
lost.
accurate.
Okay, with that, I want to
accurate.
yield back my time. Thank you.
Yeah. We'd invite the Secretary to send us proof that you know where those kids are. Ms. McBath, you're right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently joined Speaker Johnson and more than 60 colleagues to visit the southern border of Eagle Pass, Texas, one of the busiest Border Patrol entry points. What I witnessed was nothing short of an invasion facilitated by the purposeful policies of the Biden administration. It was my second trip to the border since the spring of 2021, and regrettably, the situation has only gotten worse. 2 years ago, I encountered a heart-wrenching tragedy of an unaccompanied autistic 7-year-old child, little girl, that was trafficked by the Mexican cartel. My guess is the Biden administration is clueless as to the status of this vulnerable young lady. My guess also is that she is now one of the over 100,000 unaccompanied children that have been trafficked through the Biden administration's open border, and now lost. 100,000 innocent children lost to our system. It highlights the heartless administration that does not care about the innocents. But the crisis doesn't end here. Over 100,000 Americans, primarily aged between 19 and 48, have fallen victim to fentanyl, a deadly weapon shipped from China to Mexico, processed, and then smuggled across our borders. More Americans have lost their lives in a single year than the two 20-year wars, Vietnam and Afghanistan combined. And as these Americans are being poisoned across our country, by the way, this is cross-party line. It doesn't matter what our race, creed, or color might be. Take one, and we lost another child. And as we're losing Americans, over 100,000, at this one port of entry, Eagle Pass, they're making over $34 million a year. $34 million per week through this trafficking of fentanyl. President Biden did not inherit this crisis at our southern border. He purposely created it by rolling back the successful Trump policies and then refusing to enforce U.S. immigration laws. In his first 100 days, he took 94 executive actions on immigration, resulting in 1.8 million illegal crossings since January of 2021. This is why I joined my House Republican colleagues to pass the Border Act of 2023, 7 months ago, which offered common sense solutions to the Biden border crisis. This legislation demands the completion of the border wall, the end of catch and release, an increase in Border Patrol agents, a halt to the flow of deadly fentanyl, and protection of our innocent children from human traffickers. It places the safety of American people first, a sentiment shared by citizens throughout our country who are tired of Washington's inactions. However, the Senate Democrats refused to bring it to the floor for a vote. I urge the Senate to immediately pass H.R. 2, send it to the President's desk, and stand up for the safety, security, and sacred laws of our great nation. Thank you, and I'll yield back.
We appreciate that. Under Committee Rule 9, we'll now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule, and I will begin the process. Dr. Goldfarb, 1 year ago, an article caught my attention that showed that new dimensions of critical race theory and DEI had not yet been seen. Columbia University received an instant backlash when a video surfaced from 2021 showing medical students reciting an altered version of the Hippocratic Oath during a white coat ceremony. In the video, students chanted, "We also recognize the acts and the systems of oppression effected in the name of medicine. We take this oath of service to begin building a future guarded in truth, restoration, equity, and to fill the medicine's capacity to liberate." Dr. Goldfarb, this Hippocratic Oath is a foundational statement for every student. Am I correct on that, as they take this, as they begin this journey?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there anything about the standard oath that has mentioned systems of oppressed in medicine before now?
No, sir.
It is an important part of the education is to learn about medicine to liberate?
No, sir.
I think this is interesting, and just a little bit quick background. I majored in marine biology and chemistry. My last course that I ever took, the hardest in my life, was something called organic chemistry. I did a pass-fail because I wanted to not get a grade on that one. But in the end of the day, what I realized was those who truly mastered it were able to predict certain things. There's a math that's very predictable. There's a science based on God's laws that's very predictable. This is hypothetical, but as a physician, do you think that at some point, if patients are seriously injured or dies due to this practice of DEI liberation sciences instead of clinical science, that there will be a possibility of malpractice lawsuits, not only for the physician or the med schools that train them?
Yes, so that is quite hypothetical, and I'm certainly beyond my ken. I do think that it's really important that it be viewed as a profoundly academic activity, medical school, and that the treatment of patients is really an academic activity. That, as you say, physicians must keep a lot of information in their heads, sort through it, understand human variability, and be able to apply it to that individual patient with that individual patient's problems. And that is a very academic kind of activity, and that's why I feel so strongly that it's academic achievement that ought to be the basis for acceptance into medical school and for the ability for applicants to become physicians. It really is a profoundly intellectual process that really needs to be done in the best way possible for the patient's well-being.
I think we can all agree that this is one profession that meritocracy should be the primary focus. And I will say this, advice to any personal injury lawyers that are listening in, please pay attention to words like DEI and medicine if they're ever in the same sentence, same paragraph, or the same book when it comes to medicine. I think you might have a good profession moving if that's the case. Dr. Green, first of all, I appreciate your comments.
about the oppressor and oppressed. Help me understand, just can you repeat it real quickly, the impact it's having on the Jewish community that we're now beginning to see across the country when you have this idea or this indoctrination that there is a race that is truly oppressor of everybody else?
Well, thank you for the question. Once we deviate from the principle that we're going to treat everyone equally as individuals and start treating people differently based on their group identification, it's then a question of which group do the Jews get placed in? Are they placed in the group of oppressors or oppressed? And the determination of which group people are placed in is largely based on their over or underrepresentation. So any group that's considered overrepresented is considered an oppressor. Any group considered underrepresented is considered oppressed. Jews, because they have thrived despite oppression, are overrepresented in many of these instances and therefore are treated roughly as oppressors. And it's an intellectual justification of their rough treatment in academic environments.
Okay, thanks. And Dr. Smith, real quickly, I read something you said here. DEI is harmful to the very people it claims to help. It stifles agency, and it is decidedly anti-black. As a black academic, I've been called a white supremacist by whites and blacks alike. By the way, welcome to the crowd. I've been called a KKK member by the Salt Lake Trib in Utah, believe it or not, for trying to empower black students. Can you expound on that a little bit? The last few seconds that we have.
Yes, I can. And that speaks to prescriptive racism, something I talked about during my original testimony. Prescriptive racism basically says that there is a list of characteristics that you have to abide by if you are going to be an authentic member of a group. Let's say Black Americans. If you don't abide by that script, then you are called inauthentically Black. I had the misfortune of hearing a keynote address at a conference a few years ago that really started this journey. The speaker had the argument that it was inherently racist.
We have to kind of wrap it up because we have just that's the last few seconds, if you can tie it down.
Oh, okay. It is not inherently racist to teach standardized English.
Thank you so much. To recognize myself. Mr. Secretary, you're going through great lengths to argue that the new Title IX rule will not have an impact on athletics. Setting aside the absence of court decision preventing it, and setting aside the fact that athletics is noted, printed over 30 times in the rule description, I have some very simple questions, straightforward questions. I'm just hoping I get some yes and no's on it. With energy put into Title IX rule changes, it's a 3-year effort, can you assure us that your rules do not change protection of our girls that have had for over 50 years? Can you assure us that protecting biological girls from competing against genetically stronger, bigger, and faster biological men will not be considered a federal discrimination?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. You are referring to the athletics, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that rule-making process is underway. We haven't...
Okay, and really, it's...
We haven't finalized the rules.
Okay, so is it a possibility that this girls competing against boys or refusing to would be considered discrimination?
Is
that a possibility?
I'm here to discuss, what we're doing in education to help children. Proposed rules, whether
it's really a yes or no. I mean, it should be a yes or no. It's a bridge that we all know that you're trying to get across. So is this something that you're looking at doing right now? Possibility?
I don't want to comment on a proposed rule that we haven't finalized yet.
Okay.
We have over 140,000.
Thank you. Let me just continue then. Mr. Secretary, you're in a very unique position to impact the lives, futures, and fortunes of millions of female athletes. Americans on both sides of this debate need to know how deep your commitment is. Would you force your daughter to undress in the bathroom with boys who are also undressing?
I am not going to be commenting on athletics rules that we haven't proposed.
You can't say yes or no on that?
I'd be happy to talk about a Title IX.
If your daughter was reported she felt uncomfortable in a boy's presence in a bathroom or locker room, would that be considered by your administration discrimination or bigotry?
As an educator for over 25 years...
You can't say yes or no to that?
I'd love to respond to your question, sir.
Okay, so yes or no. Would it be considered discrimination? She did not want that to happen. As
an educator for over 25 years, we have had the responsibility...
Okay, all right. I don't have but a few minutes here. Girls have now entered into contact sports of boxing and wrestling. Would you allow your daughter to physically fight and get beat up by a boy who called himself a girl? Yes or no?
Be happy to, once we finalize our regulations on Title IX athletics, to come back and have a conversation with you.
Let me just read this real quick. There's a Cherokee proverb that says, "A man's highest calling is to protect women, so she is free to walk the earth unharmed." I'll say this, Mr. Secretary, before I go on to this next topic. With all due respect, I pray that our country will never, ever have the vision that your policies are now driving us toward in terms of manhood. It's a vision that teaches our boys that harming girls is no big deal. I pray that we remain a country that produces overwhelmingly mass majorities of men who feel the way I do about my girls. I will give my life in a heartbeat for my girls. And the blessings I have is they have no doubts about that. There are millions of men and women across this country that do not have faith, do not have trust in you protecting our girls because of policies you can't say yes or no to. By the way, those are not very hard questions as a father. It's either yes or no, and you could not answer that. Okay, I'm going to switch pages real quick. At the Senate Appropriation Committee hearing last week, you stated that there's an active investigation at Columbia University, but your staff is not on site. As protests and harassment of Jewish students continue at Columbia University, this is an opportunity for the Office of Civil Rights to see firsthand what is occurring and how Columbia is failing to protect the rights of its students. You implied earlier that you were running out of funds. I have a hard time believing the Department of Education is broke. I think it's more of a priority. Is there a reason why that this has not been happening on these campuses? They've not had a presence. And if it had been Black Americans dealing with KKK bigots, would you have the same sense of presence or priorities?
Thank you for the question. Let me tell you, I'm a father, but you cannot pick and choose which students you want to protect.
You cannot choose what?
You cannot pick and choose which students you want to protect. As Secretary of Education, it's my responsibility.
I'm sorry, I missed that. You cannot choose.
All students.
I'm sorry. As a father, you cannot choose what? I'm sorry. I'm not this.
Which students you want to protect?
We protect all of them, particularly our women, right?
Including our LGBTQ students, sir.
Okay, so if, in other words, you're choosing those students over women. I'm talking about boys versus girls. That's a very simple question there.
The new Title
There's a difference.
The new Title IX regulations increase protections to all students and increase protections for women.
This is why American parents are really concerned about this administration. You cannot answer a basic question that makes common sense.
All
right?
means all, sir.
I'll say this. I know how I would protect my girls. And it seems, all right. I'll leave with that. I'm going to recognize Ms. Macbeth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and subcommittee for his closing remarks.
Thank you, and I want to thank all the witnesses. The last 2 hours, I think we can all agree on one thing, and I can describe that in 2 words. This is pure chaos. How do you destroy a college student-athlete model that's worked for all these years? Chaos. Why is it that after 118 years, now all of a sudden we have the NLRB so concerned about protection, health, safety, and respect for college athletes? That was because of the NIL. There's a lot of money on the table. It has nothing to do with the athlete. It has to do with the fact that it's a very, it's a place where you can get a lot of income just by unionizing. Now, I'm going to kind of put it as straight as I can. There's an old saying that says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. NLRB, RB, and union bosses say very simply, if it's working, break it. As long as we get paid, keep breaking it. That's what we're looking at right here. And I'm a product of this process. I went to the University of Miami. I got a scholarship there, graduated biology and chemistry. Could not afford to have done that. Did not go there to think I was going to go to the NFL. Just went there to get an education. The benefit was all the other serendipities, character, tenacity, grit, understanding ups and downs, multitasking, Mr. Sims, you mentioned that. And there's also that plus factor. The plus factor is if I meet another athlete, I already have a certain amount of respect, particularly if I've seen his ups and downs. And there's a plus factor if I found out they were wrestlers. So these are things because we understand that character being built in our process. Guess who doesn't care about that? NLRB and the union bosses. They don't care about, they're not stakeholders, they're not coaches. They're not there to see how this program falls in and works out for the athlete down the road. They care about the bottom line is how much money can we make off union dues. And we've seen this before. We've seen it in the PRO Act. When the market does not push us in the direction, what these guys like to do is force it through legislation. The PRO Act was very simply was make sure that all independent contractors are now employees. Why? Because employees now can get paid union dues. It was a mess in California when they tried to do it. They had to pull some of it back. Right now we're looking at 18 and 19-year-old kids being asked to be employees and to navigate this process of getting an education at the same time trying to figure out how can I make the most out of the time I'm here, how much money we can make. This is a way to truly destroy an industry. And I'll say this to the rank and file union members. Just know that there will be a lot of profit in the coffers of the union, but your kids, your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephews, they will be impacted by this when their programs disappear. So this is an American conversation. I don't care what side I was sitting on. We want our kids to have the greatest opportunity to build them the character we need to have the kind of productive Americans we need down the road. Let's not destroy our athletic programs we have across the country. And every child should have it, whether they're making profits or not. Colleges have figured this out because they're innovative. They know the value. Do not let the union NLRB come in and destroy this because there's so much money now made by the 1% that's coming through this process with NIL. So we're on the right track. Actually, I think from what I've heard from everyone of here that we can all agree that chaos is not where we need to go. So let's just be very careful about that. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. I'll now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Representative Wilson. Let's go to Utah, where the chair of the Higher Ed Subcommittee is recognized. Burgess Owens. Representative Owens, you are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Herling, I'd like to ask you a quick question. Would you agree that, I guess what the question is, what is the priority of education, the child or the institution?
The priority of the education system should be to make the investments in our students so that they have successful futures.
Just is it the child? Is that the priority, or is the institution? Because two different focuses I think we're kind of dealing with right now.
Investments in the children.
Okay, child, okay. State of California, 2017, 75% of the black boys in the state of California could not pass standard reading and writing tests. Here in Baltimore, 3 districts, 0 proficiency in math. Should the parents of those children, well, let me also ask this, would you agree the parents of these children care about their kids as much as everybody else, even though they're poor, black, Hispanic, they still care about those kids that are failing?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Would you agree that the parents of those children care about their kids as much as we do care about our kids?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in a situation where they're in these schools, should parents have a choice of leaving failing public schools to go someplace else?
So that is.
Can I just restate this? 75% of the black boys in the state of California fail to read, write, and think. Should those parents have a choice of leaving those failing public schools to go someplace where their kids have a chance to succeed?
The question you asked has limited the responses I can provide. The response to the actual question is we need to make an investment in these children.
Well, let me just say this. If we were talking about your child, I'm sure you would say, I want to choose someplace else. I've been hearing this for 40 years, that we need to reinvest in these schools. Guess what happens? Every 3 to 4 years, kids are graduating not understanding how to succeed as we're talking about investing more into failing schools. Should public school systems have the same level playing field in terms of the outcome as charter schools?
Well, I think that the record should say that charter schools should have the same accountability. Public schools have vastly more accountability in state law than charter schools do.
Okay, well, so why are we having so much failure across our country? Because this is not just California, by the way. Everywhere, and by the way, let me just say this, it's happening more in Black, Hispanic, and low income, this is going on.
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah, so that's the elephant in the room in our country. We know that inequality is $20 billion more go into districts that are primarily white compared to districts that are primarily black and Latino.
Well, let me say this. I know that charter schools are in the same communities as these public schools. So if you go to a charter school where you have a majority of black, Hispanic, and low income, you go to the same public school charter, you're going to have the same demographics.
Yes, but here's the answer. So here's the answer to that question. So if I go into your local supermarket, and I have $10 and I have to split it 3 ways, that's completely different than if we invested in a public choice system.
Okay,
so if you have vouchers,
let me just
charters,
say this because I don't want to get into too much of the weeds. I'm going to ask, and I look at this. The problem is accentuated, this is your statement, by a nationwide decline in K through 12 student populations in public schools. That could be because parents realizing it's not working for their kids. I think we have to understand this. How about if we look at best practices? If you thought about this, you look at what's going on in Baton Rouge, you look at what's going on in the Success Academy. If those are working, should we not replicate that if the focus is our kids?
Well, I think that's a great question. You know, we have a district in Louisiana that's all charter schools, and I don't think anybody's arguing that they're a model of educational success. After Katrina, charter schools were forced on New Orleans, and nobody's arguing that they're a beacon of educational success.
No, well, we can also not argue, we have to argue that there's 75% failure rate in California. So those public schools are failing too. My point is we should have a standard for all of them. If it's failing our kids, they should not be part of the equation, right? Would you agree with that?
I agree we should have a high standard for all schools, absolutely.
Okay, that means public schools also. If public schools are failing, let's get rid of them. If charter schools are failing, let's get rid of them. Our bottom line is our output of our kids being able to sit and have these kind of conversations, to have a dream, the ability to move forward, only happens if they can read, write, and think. And for us to talk about putting down the best practices of college, of situations that are working, I'm trying to understand why that's happening. If it's succeeding, if it's in Baton Rouge, it's succeeding, New York, I go to Success Academy, upstairs in the same building is where Success Academy is, downstairs is public. The biggest disappointment are those kids and the same families. One knows they're going to be succeeding because they're part of that lottery ticket, and the other one knows they're not going to succeed because they're going downstairs to a public school system that's going to guarantee their failure. We need to focus on our outcome, focus on our kids, not the institution. And thank you guys actually for what you're doing. I appreciate particularly those in these communities that these kids have not had a chance in the past. Thank you guys so much for that. And I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Owens. Let's go to the great state of California, where the chair of the subcommittee. I go to the great state of Utah. Mr. Burgess, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for witnesses being here today. It's one thing to hear about the bigoted behavior present on today's college campuses. It's utterly appalling to hear the activist teachers that are doing the same in our classrooms, spreading the vitriol of hate to our children in classrooms throughout our nation. Unfortunately, and all too often, these carriers of hate are teachers and school administrators. And this is going down to our kids that's supposed to be teaching. Children as young as 2nd grade are being taught to hate Jews. The question is, how did this come about? Ms. Banks, I have a quick question.
Sure.
In the press release shortly after the events of Hillcrest High School, where students stormed the building demanding a teacher's resignation and attempted to enter the teacher's room, where she hid, you said, this notion that this place, these kids are radicalized and anti-Semitic is the height of irresponsibility. Do you think that these kids were not radicalized? Do you stand by that statement?
First of all, let me say this. Hillcrest High School is the school that I graduated from, so that school is very personal
to me. I'm sorry, I only have a few minutes.
Right.
This statement, do you still stand by this statement?
My statement at that time was that, yes, I stand by that statement. The entire school was not radicalized. Yes.
All right, so if this was a black teacher, and these were kids coming in because of her skin, because of her background, hiding out for 2 hours in a classroom, these are high school kids.
I know that.
Would you still say that this is not radicalized? There's something wrong with this?
Those kids engaged, the kids who were responsible, who led that effort, engaged clearly in an act of anti-Semitism.
Okay, so I'm really,
and I dealt with that and responded to it.
My question is, if this is a black teacher being threatened and pushed by some white bigots, would you still say that these kids are not a problem that's not being radicalized by hatred?
If it was a black teacher that was being targeted, absolutely unacceptable, and this was unacceptable.
Okay,
we
so let me ask you this:
action,
was there any?
removing the principal of the school.
I'm sorry. Were there any consequences? I mean, I'm hearing nice words, really nice words here: teaching, redirecting, directing. What I'm missing is discipline, and I'm missing the word fired. Has anything happened to these kids that did this to this teacher's hiding out for 2 hours?
Well, I'm not sure if you heard clearly from what I said. What I said was very clear. We suspended a number of students who were the leaders at Hillcrest High School, number one. Number two, we removed the principal of that school for a lack of leadership and oversight. I don't know how to make it much clearer.
Okay.
I condemn clearly what happened at Hillcrest was a complete act of anti-Semitism. It will not stand on my watch. We responded, and I don't know how to make it any clearer.
No, thank you so much. I'm glad to hear somebody was fired in that. Was the principal fired or just transferred to another school?
The principal was removed from the school.
Was he taken to another school, or was he fired?
He's not in another school. No, he's not in front of any more children.
Okay. Ms. Marthel, the Brandis Center has reported at most misguided administrators have attempted to resolve problems involving teachers by moving students, Jewish students and Israeli students into new classes. As a result, anti-Semitism is normalized. Quick question: how does this work? So you find teachers that are bigots, and instead of firing them, you transfer them to another school where they can still remain bigots? Is that the way this works?
I'm a little confused by the question. You started with students being moved, and then you went to teachers being moved. I'll tell you that it's not something that we normalize. It's not something that we agree with, and we take action every time there's any concern or complaint.
I'm just trying to understand how this works. When you have teachers that are teaching hate to our kids and showing it, and our students are feeling fearful for this, are they fired or do they just transfer to another school? It appears that they're just moving to another place. In this case here, I guess that's the question I have. How is this being resolved?
If we have a concern or a complaint about anti-Semitism or any form of hate, we take it very seriously, we investigate, and we take action pending the outcome of that investigation.
Okay, all right, so I guess the action is not firing, it's just moving to someplace. The word of action is very subjective, obviously. Mr. Silvestri, real quickly, there's been several complaints filed by the Department of Education of Civil Rights. And again, what resulted in one administrative leave and the three others merely being transferred. I'm gonna ask you the same questions. How is this working out? Or do we have a process in which you can actually get bad teachers out of the classroom, bad administrators that are teaching our kids to hate like this? Are we addressing that at all?
In all of those cases, the teachers were put on leave so that we could do a thorough investigation. Disciplinary action was taken.
I guess I'm just concerned. We want results. We want discipline. We see what's happening to our kids, and we've not taken out the cancer, which is these teachers coming in, administrators that's pushing down their hate. Every day in these classrooms is a bad day for our kids. So are we getting rid of any of these people? Or just taking action, or other actions?
Disciplinary action has been taken on all of those cases.
Okay,
and
but they're not being fired.
They understand any other further action will lead to up to termination.
Okay,
Representative
Owens. Thank you. Under Committee Rule 9, we'll now question witnesses under 5-minute rule, and I'll begin the process. Ms. Emery Eris, the FAFSA is usually released with a full functionality by October 1st. For the 2024-2025 FAFSA cycle, the Department of Education missed the October 1st, 2023 deadline completely. And then when the FAFSA was finally released at the end of December, several elements were delayed. Can you talk about what elements were delayed and how long they will be delayed?
Sure. To begin with, as you mentioned, there was the 90-day delay in the availability of the form. Subsequent to that, there was a delay in the department's processing of the form that was 161 days late. After that, the department provided students the functionality to make corrections late as well. That was 197 days late. Education then finally began processing paper FAFSAs in August, which was 305 days late. And we know that the function of doing batch corrections for colleges has yet to be instituted, and we expect it to be at least a year late, maybe more at this point.
Okay. As you guys do your your investigation, can you identify who it is that is failing the system? Are there individuals that you can identify, or is it just the system that is failing us overall? How does that work? I mean, normally, if somebody is this incompetent, they're fired. Is there any way that we can figure out where this is happening within the system?
Although I wouldn't be able to speak to that particular issue, I know that there have been leadership changes at the department, and I would say that we've had senior leaders very involved in this study. We've had GAO's Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel meeting regularly with the Chief of Staff and General Counsel at the Department of Education.
Okay. I've been amazed by the number of press releases produced by the Biden-Harris administration about this illegal student debt scheme. It seems like every other month we had something with that. Was the department clear and timely when it came down to communicating with students and colleges regarding the FAFSA delays and problems?
It was not.
Okay. Ms. Cruz-Kane, when did the federal student aid first realize it was likely to miss the October 2023 release deadline?
They first realized it in August of 2022.
So it was a year prior, almost. Correct. Yeah. How long did it take for the federal student aid to finally tell the public? They knew about a year early. When did they finally tell the public?
They made their final decision in early 2023, and that decision was made after briefing leadership from education and also the Executive Office of the President. And the public was notified about the shift from October to December on March 21st of 2023, so that was about 7 months later after they began the discussions. And then finally, on November 15th, 2023, the public was notified that the application would be available on December 31st, and that was about 8 months after the initial notification of the delay.
Okay. Has the federal student aid finalized a detailed plan for the upcoming year's FAFSA to avoid a repeat of last year's disaster?
They've verbally given us promises that they're going to continue to do better testing, have better plans to address system defects, but we have not seen any documents that involve what the test plans would look like, if they plan on conducting any independent reviews. So we've heard a lot of testimonial evidence about their plans, but haven't received any documentation to back those up.
Okay. So the simplification law has been in effect beginning of this administration. 4 years later, we still do not have sure if the FAFSA will be fully functional for a second year in a row, which is totally unacceptable. It is amazing that this has been on. This has been around for 30 years, and it only took 3.5 to just blow it up totally, and here we are still trying to figure it out. So thank you so much. I'd now like to recognize the ranking member for purpose of asking the question.
Thank you. Ms. Emery.
The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Owen.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to tie down that last question I had for you. Are you saying then we're not going to punish the doctors that have religious freedom to say no to these operations? Is there any consequence to the institutions that are hiring these doctors? Yes or no?
Garson, if you understand the way this works, an institution is seeking federal reimbursement dollars.
So that federal reimbursement will end if they do not.
Well, they accept the reimbursement dollars under certain conditions. They have to follow the rules of federal law.
And those rules will be their employees have to make sure they do these operations.
No, they have to make sure they're offering services. If they hold themselves out to be
let me just say this. Let me just finish up. I've taken a lot of time, but this one question I think is very stealth the way you guys are approaching this. You're not hurting the doctor, but you're hurting their employee, and that's what it comes down. You're taking away their funds.
No,
either way, the result is the same.
Congressman, it's been very direct, and again, people have conscious rights, religious rights.
But you're punishing the institution. I yield back. I think anyway. I yield back.
Mr. Scott, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Barrick, I just have a real quick question. I looked at your background. You've been government worker for 46 years. Is that correct in that range? Okay. Have you ever run a business?
Have I ever owned a business?
Yes.
No, I have not owned a business.
The employees that you have, are they in Are they coming from the industries that you oversee? You have people, for instance, in the tree service industry. Anybody like that within OSHA that are hired there? Or are they also government workers, pretty much?
I'm sorry, is there anybody in OSHA that's worked in the tree? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. What I'm trying to understand is the experience that you have when you oversee the broad spectrum of businesses you oversee. And my concern is, I think there's a premise, it starts off that the employee cares more about, that the OSHA employees care more about business, the employees out in the field than the owners do, the folks in this area. Am I correct on that? Is that something that you kind of think you have to protect employees from the employers?
I think most employers want to do the right things and protect their employees. I have no doubt about that, and most of the employers I've met want to. But there are a lot of employers who don't. I mean, who cut corners on safety and workers'
it sounds like the rules seems like they're tainted toward those who don't care. And I guess my concern is I look at just common sense of you have a comment period that people have to go through. My experience is very simply this: when you have a government employer, a government employee that seems to know it all already, and you give them the power to do whatever they want to do, the comment period doesn't really mean very much. What is already preordained is going to come out. This is the way my experience has been. Would it be helpful that maybe if you're overseeing these industries, that somebody who understands the industry is represented within the government process?
Yes. Let me say two things about that. One is, again, OSHA's got a very small budget. They can only have so many staff there. They can't have staff that's an expert in every area. But what OSHA does to address that is they use a lot of their regulatory funding to hire consultants that do have that kind of experience.
These consultants are not, and here's another problem. First of all, I always hear about the lack of money, and I'll be honest with you, entrepreneurs are very happy when OSHA doesn't have a lot of money, because what happens is you're putting people out of business. The things that you're doing, even for someone as a lay person, makes no sense unless you're going in with the premise that these are bad guys. They need to be stopped. They need to be halted. You mentioned, is your son a fireman? You mentioned, I don't know if your son is a fireman or not.
I'm sorry,
you mentioned earlier that if your son was a fireman.
Yeah, right. I didn't say he is. I was saying if any of my children were fire responders, I would want them to have.
With that being said, would you agree that the fire chief, if your son was a fireman, the fire chief would care more about your son than some stranger in D.C. who has no idea who your son is?
I think that's kind of a red herring.
No, it's not a red
OSHA has.
Okay, I'll reclaim my time.
No, but OSHA has a robust.
I just have a few minutes. That is what's called common sense. If someone who is in the game, who oversees people that they know, they're employing people that they want to keep, retain, do they care more about some bureaucrat who has no idea but has a lot of good theories? And that's the problem with OSHA, is a lot of good theories, but it runs people out of business. We're concerned about rural communities holding on to fire services, but it doesn't seem like the D.C. people really understand that or care about it, because you're not listening to the concerns. You put together a comment period, and you're going to do what you're going to do. We all understand how that works. So I just real quickly, Chief Bradley, if you could have some suggestions or ideas about how to approach this one-size-fits-all for each emergency services. Could you, within the next 30 seconds, kind of explain what that would look like? If you can kind of give an idea or support or suggestions of how this should be approached.
Yes, I think that the standards should be written prescriptive to the needs of injury prevention rather than adopting by reference industry standards that cover a lot of things that are not specific to injuries. Also, I think involvement of the fire service leadership in writing those rules would be beneficial.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate all your feedback. I'll get back. I think I'd like to start off by framing this in light of the border. This is not by accident. And we've seen an attack on our educational system. It has been on purpose. This type of incompetency cannot be on accident. The cost of illegal immigration is taking a substantial toll in our country and our educational system. In Utah alone, illegal immigrants is estimated to be adding 54,000 students to local school systems. This total estimate cost of illegal immigration amounts to over $900 million. Now, this is a state that's close to $1 billion of extra costs, a state that prides itself on a balanced budget. It is unacceptable, unjust to students, teachers, and citizens to pay this price for President Biden's strategy for power. If misery is the goal of President Biden, not only is he an all-pro, but he's a Hall of Famer. We're looking at misery of parents that have to try to figure out how to get the resources for their children to learn. Misery in particular for the at-risk communities like Black communities that's already been stripped of resources because of the Biden COVID shutdown. At the school system in Virginia, 60% of Black students have lost 2 years of learning, and this will make it impossible for them to catch up. It's not only also in misery for legal immigrant children. Of course, I'd like to mention that 85,000 of them have been lost by this administration. They're unable to assimilate. They're unable to speak the language, to understand what American culture is all about. They're stuck as wards of the government. Poverty is their future, and it's on purpose. They're vulnerable to crime and gang violence. They're vulnerable to sexual and physical abuse. And these guys just don't care. So as we go through this process, please remember, if this is on purpose, there's only one word I can call it. It's called evil. No one should ever do this to children, vulnerable for power. And that's what we have going on right now. Ms. Egoran, in your testimony, you highlighted the Department of Education shows that 26 states have a shortage of English student learning teachers. How severe is that process going on right now? And is the answer to spin our way out?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems is that there are 26 states now that have this shortage, as documented by the report by the Department of Education. And you know, this is not just teachers who speak Spanish, because there are children from every single country coming, and so it's just very hard to plan and then to be able to serve adequately. Okay.
It appears that the goal is, and as you mentioned in testimony, that New York is lowering the bar of educational achievement following the learning loss of COVID. Is this a new American wave process now to figure out how dumb we can get our kids and call that success?
So what New York did, it's so appalling. And for me as a mother, I can't believe what they are asking me to do. Basically, they said that what third graders, for example, could do a few years ago, it's not what third graders now can do. So what they are telling me is that my 11-year-old, what he could do in third grade is not what I should expect for my lowest son, my youngest son. No parent will accept that. And what New York is doing is try to hide the learning loss from closing schools for so long, from masking mandates, from COVID vaccine mandates that prevented children and parents from going in our school buildings.
Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, you mentioned the public school system communities have become hotbeds of criminal activity, recruitment, exploitation, and death. We have experienced that in Utah. In Utah, this last February, we had an illegal alien raped an 11-year-old girl. Can you elaborate more on the failure of securing the border has created and the type of environment that's set up because of this policy?
Yes. So, and I think that that's one of the most egregious things is that this isn't safe for the children, for the students, for the staff, for the communities in these schools and in the surrounding areas. We're failing. We're failing the future of our country. We're failing on every level.
And Ms. Mark, what are the in California? When you strain our system, what are the services and programs that are first to be cut from taxpayers' children when these resources are short?
Yes, it's always our most disadvantaged and our most vulnerable children that suffer the most. Those are the programs that go first, and we have a significant number of those children in California, about 800,000, and also a significant amount here in Orange County. So,
well, I'll just say this. Anyone in the Biden administration that has any touch at all in education should be fired. This is not something we should ever expect for our children to go through. These are the most vulnerable in our country, and they simply do not care. It's called evil. So thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate it. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative. Let's go to the Northern Mariana Islands.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the chair, Chairwoman Fox, for remarkable visionary leadership. I'm going to speak to the ACE Act, which is a part of the End Woke Higher Education. Our nation's education system is built on the fundamental values of free speech, freedom of religion, and the guaranteed rights of hearty and healthy debates. These core principles are so inherent to America that we often take them for granted. We, over time, assume that these freedoms will always be safe without any effort on our part to protect them. Unfortunately, this is not the case. A glance at our university system reveals a troubling trend: ideological conformity and intolerance when not compliant is undermining academic freedom. This is systemic acceptance of a new litmus test in the accreditation world. Institutions of higher learning are facing immense pressure from creditors to conform to the anti-American Marxist doctrine of DEI and critical race theory, or losing access to federal funding. This is not the education our founders envisioned in their quest for America to continue to be a more perfect union. My dad was a college professor for 40 years at Florida A&M. Being raised in Tallahassee, Florida, in the shadows of FAMU and Florida State, I remember distinctly the era when our nation's colleges and universities prided themselves on merit, competition, and in that era was also classrooms that valued free speech, free exchange of ideas, and higher standards that were proudly taught. Fast forward to 2024, throughout our nation, religious institutions and conservative colleges that seek to teach their own values, the same values that students are signing up for and paying for, they risk losing federal funding by doing this process, by teaching this process. The ACE Act brings this attack on the foundation of our American culture to an end. It allows every educational institution in our country to return to its original mission, which is to educate students in American tradition of free and open debate, to allow for the training of critical thinking skills and to prepare them to enter and succeed in America's innovation and diverse workforce. The ACE Act reinforces the autonomy of every school to develop their own curriculums and policies without undue pressure to conform to the Marxist agenda pushed by politicized accreditation bodies. Most importantly, this upholds our constitutional right of free speech, which is fundamental to preserving the legacy of freedom for all future generations. I urge my colleagues to join me in defending the basic American rights afforded us by the Constitution and support the ACE Act, H.R. 3724. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman
Owens, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just start off by saying that courage and leadership finds itself in the moment. And I must say, we, as a nation, we're seeing that it was not available. We did not see that in these college campuses. What I think we were looking for was strength, fairness to all, including our Jewish students, wisdom, and the recognition that hatred cannot be negotiated with. I'm really curious. I'm trying to understand how you have negotiations. And by the way, President Shield, would you have the same patience, the same strategy if these were KKK white supremacists that were trying to negotiate that was actually attacking and intimidating black people? Would you have the same patience with that? What'd you do with
Representative Owens, thank you for the question. I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals like that.
This is how you deal with hatred. I'm trying to give you a kind of understanding that we're talking about Jewish students. If it was black students against KKK instead of pro-Hamas, would you deal with them the same exact way as you dealt with these two students?
I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals.
All right, so the answer is no. Okay. Let's move on. I'll just say this. It's striking that you decided to negotiate a sweetheart deal with pro-Hamas students and professors who denied October 7th. Either they deny it, they celebrate it, or they simply don't care. I looked at that as pure evil. Mr. Shield, now, how much money has Northwestern University received from Qatar sources, including Qatar-connected entities at the Qatar Foundation?
The amount that we have received from the Qatar Foundation to fund our campus in Qatar, all of the resources that we have gotten, there's been a lot.
It doesn't take, I'm looking for short answers. I only have about 3 minutes left, please, okay? So how much?
I don't have the
Let's
dollar
say- let's
number.
say
You
between
have a
500
check that says.
Oh, yeah. Let's say between 500 and
You have a
7
check that
million,
says
100
that
million,
amount.
okay?
Every dollar has gone to the operation of the campus or the
All right,
management of the campus.
would you mind doing me, we'd like to have a complete transparent accounting to just how much exactly is coming from this. Now, are you aware this is the same Qatar government that has partnered with the currently harbors the leaders of Hamas and estimated to have given the terrorist organization of Hamas about $1.8 billion? Are you aware of that? Qatar?
They are harboring those leaders with the knowledge.
Okay, are you aware
and
that they? I'm
the
just asking
United
a
States
question. Yes or
government
no?
supports
Please, yes or
that
no?
and has
Are
supported
you aware
that.
1.8 billion has been given to
Pardon
Hamas
me?
from Qatar?
Pardon me?
Are you aware that terrorists have given that Qatar has given the terrorists $1.8 billion to Hamas?
This is not my area of
all right, you're not aware.
expertise.
Okay. Are you aware that the Iranian officials travel in and out of Doha to meet with Hamas?
This is not in my area of expertise.
Do you think, if this was true, do you think it'd be a good idea for the University of Northwestern to partner with a government that harbors terrorist Hamas and Iranian operatives who fund terrorism? Yes or no? Just
I'm
no.
not going to engage in yes or no
so
answers.
obviously you don't have a problem with that. Northwestern's School of Journalism is a formal
I really am
partnership with.
offended
I'm
by
sorry,
you telling me what my views
time.
are.
A formal partnership with the Qatar media outlet Al Jazeera. Did you know that?
I'm sorry?
Did you know that your Northwestern School of Journalism is a formal partnership with Al Jazeera?
I, in fact, just found out about that last week.
Okay, well, let me make you aware of it then, because Al Jazeera, because of their pro-Hamas reporting, the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, asked the Qatar Prime Minister to tone down Al Jazeera's anti-Israel incitement. Also, it was Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt that had blocked Al Jazeera because of their pro-Hamas mouthpiece. My understanding is that you have a contract with the Qatar Foundation that expires at the end of 2027-2028 academic year, which now that you know about Qatar, would you be willing to, are you going to still renew that contract?
The review of that contract is being done by the provost office, and
okay,
it will
so
be.
it is. So I'm sorry.
May I just finish
I'm
the
sorry.
answer?
These are really short questions. Knowing that Al Jazeera is a mouthpiece for Hamas, are you willing to end that partnership?
The decision with respect to the Qatar campus is ultimately the Board of Trustees, and I actually am concerned by the agreement that you're talking about with Al Jazeera, and we are going to look into it.
Yeah, okay. This is an issue that I'm thankful we're pulling the curtains back, because this is not just beginning now. Obviously, it's been going on a long, long time. We're going to make sure we keep follow up on this. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Owens, your time has expired. Mrs. May. Thank you. Mr. Owens, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Back in December, I made a statement that I've seen this movie before, and that seems like it's not changed. I grew up in the Deep South, 1960s, days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation. My first exposure to white Americans wasn't until I was 16 years old. I was one of 4 black athletes to integrate a formerly all-white high school, and remember vividly the morning after Martin Luther King's assassination, walking to our high school courtyard and seeing spray painted on the wall in red, "Ding dong, the king is dead." Let's fast forward to the experience of 2024. If I came to Columbia campus, what would be the response if members of my race were harassed by KKK bigots, mocked, called an N-word, spit upon, hit with a stick, ostracized? Would these same bigots and racists be allowed to protest at Columbia's campus spewing anti-black hate speech? And instead of wearing their white KKK hoods, would these cowards be granted free speech status as they hid their faces behind black masks and full head scarves? At a total cost of $90,000 per year, would black students be forced to attend a class of a tenured Columbia professor while discussing the past events of a massacre of black men and women and children, black girls being raped and black men being lynched, and would speak in glowing terms of this event as stunning, awesome, and astonishing? President, I'd like to ask you, would this treatment of black Americans be tolerated for 1 second?
What you've described, Congressman, is completely unacceptable. I, too, grew up in the South in the 1960s and share that experience.
So yes or no, would this be tolerated for 1 second?
I beg your pardon?
Would this be tolerated, this treatment of black Americans for 1 second on Columbia's campus?
Absolutely not. And
okay. I just want to continue this because if this would not be tolerated for blacks, why has it been for months and years? We're talking about a professor who goes back 20 years now. This guy has been around a long time. So why is it that Jewish Americans can then be treated by these bigots and bullies in this manner?
It is not tolerated and it is not acceptable. And over the last 6 months, we have done everything we can and have worked tirelessly to improve our policies.
Okay, let me just say this real quickly. Let me tell you why I think these two standards are prevalent. At Columbia's the core teaching values are DEI and CRT, which are racist and anti-Semitic teachings of Marxism. The racist beliefs are that blacks are hopeless, weak, and oppressed race that needs protection and pity of the white race. Anti-Semitic beliefs are that Jewish race are the oppressor race, and that all minorities need to be protection from them, and therefore hated. If you ever wonder why the heinous crimes of October 7th never moved the needle of empathy at Columbia, this is why. I personally think that it takes a true lowlife, repugnant human being to make the statement that the massacre of innocent men, women, and children, the raping of girls, the beheading of children, the burning alive of human beings was stunning, awesome, and astonishing. But what truly speaks volumes is the moral compass of Columbia, that this rabid anti-Semite is still on your payroll today. He's got cocky, and for 20 years he's done the same thing. It's just a little tip of the iceberg of what's going on there and what's being taught in our classes. There's a statement from a Jewish student. It is impossible to exist as a Jewish student at Columbia without running face first into anti-Semitism every single day. Jew hatred is so deeply embedded into the campus culture that it's become casual among students, faculty, and neglected by administrators. Do you agree with this statement, President?
I have met those students and heard those words in the listening sessions that I've been holding. I believe in leadership by presence and walking around, and I have listened to those students, and it has distressed me hugely.
Let me just, I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off. I just have a few seconds here. Let me tell you what my major concern is. Thousands of Columbia students coming from countries that hate America and the other democracy in that region, Israel. How does this work? International students paying a total of $90,000 a year up front, skip classes to demonstrate, bully Americans, burn American flags, stop traffic in our countries as they shout death to America. In some kind of way, they still get a degree. I think most of us, unless they're genius, most of us spend 100% of our time trying to pass our courses, particularly $90,000 per year. I'm running out of time. I'll just say this. I'd like to know how many of these folks are actually graduating and what degrees are and how they're getting paid to come to our campus and bully our kids the way they are right now. And with that, I'd like to yield back.
Thank you. Mrs. Hayes, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to start before I get into my questions by saying that I am a woman of deep personal faith, and my faith forces me to respect the faith of others. So the injection of biblical theology into this committee hearing is inappropriate. But if we were to talk about that, I would say that my faith is used as a shield to protect others and not a sword to hate or harm others. I guess I call myself a Matthew 25 Christian. But there's a few things that I would like to clarify or have the witnesses clear up before I get into my questions. Professor Shizer, my colleague suggested that students are getting away with hitting.
I was blessed to grow up in a time when the foundation of tenets of our country was very simple. And it's something that I think Americans are thriving for today, hankering for today. And it's called faith, family, the free market, and education. And that's really what we stand for. I'll say this, what we don't stand for, we don't tolerate is surrender. We don't want to surrender our culture. In these last 3 years, we've seen as a president who started off as surrendering in Afghanistan. He surrendered to the cartel at the border. He surrendered over 100,000 lives by not shutting down the border. He surrendered the middle class that's now dealing with inflation like never have before, and the hopes and dreams that they're hoping to hold on to. He surrendered to crime, particularly in cities where people are most vulnerable. We understand that, we see it, and I think the polls are showing that the American people wants better, and they deserve better. And I'm looking forward to our conference growing, giving Americans what they have always wanted and desired to have, and that's the hopes and dreams that really makes up the American way. So we're excited about what we're seeing here this weekend, but more excited about getting back to go to work to make sure the American people's voices are heard, and we win big time in November. With that, I'm going to have Rudy come up and kind of give a few statements here, for sure.
Thank you.